Welcome to episode 2 of the Social Web TV, the internet TV show that answers the question, who owns your data, with these two simple words, you do. And we've survived one episode of the show, and we're back.
It was so much fun, I thought we'd do it again.
Yeah. We've got some great feedback from all over the internet, and please keep it coming, because that's how we can make this more of a conversation and get better each week. Among the key things that we got some feedback, I noticed that someone thought episode 1 was really the polo shirt episode.
Episode 2 will not be, though.
Although I noticed, Joseph, you're sporting the exact same shirt as last time.
What? No, this is clearly a different shade of blue than last week. Come on. Yeah?
I don't think so.
It is, but
all right.
subtle issue.
We also got some more serious feedback. Viewer Ken Kennedy let us know that the formatting of our website right now doesn't support some podcast scenarios. So
enclosures in the RSS feed because we're pulling in Vidler things, but hopefully we can figure that out.
Any update on that, David?
Still working with Vidler and FeedBurner to try to figure out how we can get that all sorted out.
All right, so we're working on it. Also, we got some web love from the folks at GNIP that were featured in the first episode. A nice blog post that we'll link to, which sent us a nice set of thanks in the form of a warm, gooey chocolate chip cookie. So
Have we received the cookie though?
Yeah.
I thought maybe you got it.
It didn't come to my address.
I was expecting GNIP to push the update to me. Do we have to pull for it or something, or too soon?
All right. So seriously, we are open to all sorts of bribes. So please send us a real chocolate chip cookie.
And if you didn't get Joseph's joke, check out episode 1 from last week, where
All
we
right.
talk all about pushing and pulling.
But I also think there might be some interesting news coming up on the GNIP front, maybe in the category of overheard, actually on TechCrunch. So there was an event this last weekend, David, you were at it as well?
Yeah, O'Reilly's annual Foo Camp event, where they invite a few hundred friends of O'Reilly up to their campus for sort of Friday through Sunday. It's an unconference style event, so much like Bar Camp, where everybody gets together, full day's worth of sessions. And Michael Arrington of TechCrunch did an interview of Evan Williams from Twitter talking about their acquisition of Sumeyes. And one of the things through that interview was Ev was talking about how they're working with the GNIP to try to get GNIP access to the real-time Jabber feed of all of the public tweets.
That'll be great.
I guess not an exact announcement, but confirmation that the parties are talking, so hope to see some good things there. Any other interesting updates from the week?
All sorts of amazing people and sessions at Foo Camp. I think one of my favorite sessions had actually nothing to do with web technology, but was put on by an astronaut, where he spent a bit over an hour talking about what it's like to fly the space shuttle, fly Soyuz, live on the International Space Station for 6 months. So that was really incredible, as well as the whole slew of sessions around the web, around blogging, around social networks, and just about anything that you could think of.
And I guess we also got some nice link love from Mark Cantor, who's one of the co-authors of the Bill of Rights for users of the social web. And Mark, I guess, was also doing a podcast just yesterday with Steve Gilmore of the Gilmore Gang. What was the topic? I think is the open mesh, which is not the same as Microsoft's mesh project, but a kind of
Right, sort of their spin on how you can use these open building blocks to let you sort of build a persistent set of your data and your connections that you can take around to all these different websites. So really cool to see people attacking this problem from lots of different angles and sort of seeing how it all impacts each other.
And we'll definitely have Mark on the show sometime in the future to come and talk about his vision of the open mesh, which he's been actually painting all over his fence in his backyard.
That's right, they're doing a big mural.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if we do, I think we won't have the same liberty to do as an hour-and-a-half episode, but
as a podcast.
I have made it partway through. I intend to listen to the whole thing, and I think it's actually a really interesting topic, so I recommend you go check it out, and we'll include a link in the program. So now on to our show. This week, there's some interesting news from a company called Meebo, who's in the instant messaging space and has actually been involved in this overall effort to make the web itself more social.
We have a special guest today, the Meebo Pirate Emoticon that users of Meebo will know is one of the little characters you can put in your instant messaging. It's nice to get them on time for the show.
Yeah,
Very in demand.
So Joseph, you want to tell us a little bit about what's in the news with Meebo?
Sure. So if you haven't seen it, Meebo is a web-based instant messaging service. So if you use AIM or Yahoo or Microsoft, you can log into Meebo.com and it's got a web version of all those instant messages. And one of the things that's cool about it is you can actually connect up the different accounts you use. And so in a way, it's kind of like what we've been talking about and letting users use multiple accounts and having it all sort of work together in the context of instant messaging.
So solving a real pain point around interoperability.
Interoperability, right, which clearly users really want, and I mean, and their growth has been through the roof. So that's been really cool to see. And so recently, you noticed Facebook built a sort of instant messaging system into Facebook called Facebook Chat, where when you're logged in, if some of your friends are also logged in at the same time, you can do a kind of real-time instant messaging chat there. Not surprisingly, lots of those other social networks want this functionality too. And doing that kind of real-time chat is a pretty complicated problem to get right. And so Meebo announced yesterday that they've got a solution called Community Instant Messaging, where essentially any social network or site can drop in a little code and Meebo will power instant messaging on their site for them. Mm-hmm. So very cool, kind of making that site more social.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Meebo did with their chat, though, which is a little bit different than Facebook, is that from the beginning, Meebo's been talking about using Jabber and XMPP, which we talked about last week, to be able to power the chat. And so what that really means is that instead of just going to one of these social networks and chatting with your friends there, there's the possibility that you'll be able to chat with friends across all the different social networks. And that's something that really Jabber has shown is successful, where LiveJournal users can talk to Google Talk users and now hopefully to users from these social networks as well.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And I guess one of the things that stood out to me was, if you think about the list of sites that were the launch partners for this Meebo product, of course, as you'd expect, some of the other social networking sites and some of the larger sort of Web 2.0 social sites like Flickster, but also sites like PopSugar, which is a very popular sort of celebrity gossip blog, but not traditionally what you'd think of as a social network. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think they sort of realized in a way the same thing that Google Friend Connect people realized, which we talked about in previous shows, namely that in any of these sites, there's potential for a lot of social interaction, right? You have all these people coming to PopSugar to share interests and want to talk about the latest celebrity gossip, and it's kind of latent in there, right? Generally, you just go and you see the web page, and you can't really socialize. And so these technologies like Friend Connect or like Meebo all of a sudden can bring social to those pages, and all of a sudden there's all kinds of activity that goes on there. So to me, it was really another example of that, how we talk about here, that the whole web is becoming social. This notion that social networking is a destination, I think is very transitory, and that in fact you're going to see all these sites where you can naturally go and socialize. So yeah, very cool to see another piece of that.
Well, and it's something like that we're seeing from a blogging perspective already, where we have sites like Boing Boing, which are going and building in more community features to allow their readers to become commenters and then to interact with each other, mm-hmm. and not just the bloggers being the ones creating content. So I think Meebo is really continuing that as well, turning it into sort of live chat style communication.
So a pretty cool announcement, but putting it in that broader perspective, we're really talking about the model of social flipping from widgets inside walled gardens to a set of building blocks coming together that can enable the transformation of any site into becoming a social site. Joseph, you want to talk a little bit about some of that at the kind of building blocks level?
Yeah, well, I guess, in the Meebo announcement, they didn't talk much about the technical details of how you would implement this, but, if you just sort of think about it, you've got to know, who the people on the site are, and you've got to know who their friends are, and you've got to be able to do sort of social activity between them, and, it's all those same building blocks we already talk about. There's this identity piece, who are you? Are you the same person I know from before? Show me your profile information. Don't make me put that all in from scratch. There's the who you know piece, right? I mean, a buddy list in instant messaging is just like a friends list. It's just like an address book. So same thing, Google Friends list, Google Friend Connect, been doing, and then being able to share activity back and forth. And in fact, one of the things that is interesting, I don't know how this will all work out, but one of the neat things I think about Google Friend Connect is that while it's a useful product in and of itself, it's actually
quick. Maybe inject there. Google Friend Connect. A reminder: this is a fairly new offering. It's really not out there broadly, but there are a few example sites, and it lets anyone with a website or web page sprinkle in a little bit of code and then instantly turn it into a social site.
Mm-hmm. And crucially, one where you can bring in your existing profile and friends list, and you can share activity out. So not sort of creating yet another silo, but
all the complexity of doing that is
Right.
hidden under the covers.
Right.
And
Well,
so-
and building Google Friend Connect using technologies like OpenID and OAuth and OpenSocial,
Right.
so that's not going and creating a whole nother set of technologies, but rather showing how you can start to combine these things into Google Friend
So
Connect.
it's kind of a carrier for these open building blocks. And so any of the sites that are running Google Friend Connect or that build it themselves have these open building blocks, but they can be used for other purposes as well. So you could imagine if Meebo built it this way, that any site that was already using these open building blocks of OpenID or OpenSocial or Portable Contacts or what have you, you could sort of plug Meebo chat into that for free because you've got those building blocks already.
Well, I think that's going to be one of the interesting questions, is seeing where does Meebo Chat go in terms of sort of how many choices do they give social networks implementing it between, do they say you can have your own closed chat network, but by the way, it's very easy to make it open and work with other networks, or do they take a stance of only using the open technology so that users between social networks can always chat with each other, and sort of how that evolves, how do they continue building it?
Well, but even in terms of just the work that any of these sites would have to do to build those APIs in one form or another to plug in the chat, I think it's one of the things that makes me really excited about open technologies is if these different products are all fundamentally sort of socially enabling technologies and using those same building blocks, then if there's a set of different services you might be interested in, and they're using those same building blocks, you don't have to build each one from scratch. Once you put in the work to put in Friend Connect or put in Meebo, you get the others sort of for free or for diminishing cost. And so there's this virtuous cycle that happens when you use open technologies, and I hope we'll start to see more and more of that.
Now, I know that over the last minute or two, we've thrown quite a number of terms around, and we didn't pause to define them. Those included OpenID, OAuth, Portable Contacts, OpenSocial. And I think in upcoming episodes, we may want to take each one of those and give it a kind of a focus and a bit of a deeper dive. Believe it or not, 10 minutes or more has already passed by, so let's consider this episode in the can and look forward to what I think is going to be a really big week next week. Really two key events. One of them in the middle of the week, which is F8, the Facebook Developer Conference. Believe it or not, it's only the second annual conference. So last year,
Can you believe that?
I guess it was probably in the
It
April,
was
May
May,
timeframe, is when the Facebook platform launched. And really this big discussion around open really in many ways kicked off in that time frame. So
And certainly the things we've been talking about with Facebook and Friend Connect and Facebook Connect and dynamic privacy, and hopefully we'll learn a lot more about those next week at F8.
And in fact, it's our plan to film episode 3 on location at F8. So we hope to get some interesting things going there.
Yeah.
David, there's another event going on that you'll be at, I know.
Yeah, O'Reilly's Open Source Conference is also happening in Portland next week.
OzCon.
So we'll be up there. And I'm sure we'll see a bunch of other interesting things coming out of that event. I always really enjoy it because it's a very good sort of technical event focusing on open source and sort of hitting a whole range of different issues throughout it.
Yeah, OzCon's great, and it's really interesting in the last few years where that sort of traditional Unix open source sort of world has been meeting this kind of open standards, open web world, and realizing they've got a lot of the same sort of DNA and a lot of the same tactics that have worked, and so it's definitely an exciting time up there now.
Yeah, I mean, open source has always been very important and continues to be important, but as more and more services move online and into the cloud and you're relying on these hosted services, it's sort of mattering a little bit less of can I get the source code to run Gmail on my desktop, but making sure that I can always have access to my data in these cloud applications.
It's something Tim O'Reilly, among others, has spoken pretty eloquently about, right? Open data is just as important as open source these days.
All right, so if you're going to be at either of the conferences and you're a viewer of this show, please don't be shy. Come on up, introduce yourself, let us know how we can make this better. And I can tell you that next week is going to be a blockbuster show. Make sure to tune in to our next episode of The Social Web TV!